Hi, my name is Aya, you're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about Booktube's best romance and romantasy they read in 2024. So basically, I'm going to show you the top 15. Every book I have not read, I will be reading in this video. So it's going to be both a list video and like a reading vlog. So this is going to have a couple parts. So the first part will be describing my method of madness. Basically, I'm going to tell you how many videos I've watched to determine the top 15. I'm gonna tell you which videos I included and which ones I didn't include, the time span I watched these videos in, stuff like that. Then I'm gonna talk about the top 15. So I'm gonna literally show you each and every book. There's actually more than 15 books in here because I also talk about series, and some books share the same spot. So I believe in total there's like 19 books or series I'm going to be talking about. And whenever I haven't read a book, you'll see a vlog clips of me actually reading it. Then I'm going to talk about some diverse romances that some people talked about, but not enough to make it into the top 15. And I did want to make sure to highlight those books and highlight the booktubers that talked about those books, so maybe put them on your radar. So I did want to have a section for that, and I would definitely encourage you to watch that section as well. And then I think at the end I'm going to talk about some books that you would think would have made it but barely made it, I guess. So let's get started with the method. Basically, I organize this list the way I read books, meaning series I just put together. So yes, that means that series have a higher chance of making it into the top 15 than not series. And whatever is on Goodreads, I classify as a series. So whatever Goodreads says is a series for me. I looked at the Booktube's own video to determine whether or not a book would be included, meaning I myself would not add honorable mentions, but if somebody did like a top 24, even if like the lower ranked books only were like a 3.5, if the booktuber themselves said that it's part of their favorites, then I included it. Yet another video of another booktuber that only had a top 10, like for example, their 5 honorable mentions was like a 5-star rating. I didn't include those 5 honorable mentions since I don't include honorable mentions in this list. I don't know if that made any sense. I couldn't include books that were not published yet because obviously if they were not published, I could not read them. Yet if they're part of a series where I haven't read the first book, I did include it. The big one here is the only videos I included are videos where at least 40% of the books mentioned in their favorites video were either romances or romantasies. Other videos where maybe like 1 or 2 books were included that were romances, I didn't include those in this list because I wanted to make sure that it was actually people that were consistently reading romances or romantasies that were included in this list. So 40% means if it's a top 10, then at least 4 books had to be romances or romantasies. If it was like a top 24, then at least 9 books had to be romances or romantasies. I made a playlist of every single favorites video I included in this list, so I'll have that linked for you. Definitely check that out. I also tagged every single person that I included in this video, so check that out. Definitely check the description. Every adult romance is allowed, and every subgenre in the adult romances. So fantasy romance, obviously, contemporary romance, dark romance, alien romance, any type of subgenre that you can think of in the adult romance genre is included. And the only YA category I allowed was YA fantasy romance or romantasy, because in my opinion, I find young adult romantasy and adult romantasy to be pretty similar. And I find that a lot of romance booktubers I watch and love tend to also read young adult fantasies. I didn't include any other YA category. So YA contemporary, I didn't include because I feel like YA contemporary and adult contemporary is definitely very different. I think I watched up until like January 10th because then my list had to be completed. So I know I'm missing a lot of videos. I watched, let me actually see, 242 videos in total. So that's a lot. I do have to say at the end, I kind of got burnt out on watching all these videos. And at one point I just had to stop because I needed to start reading books to complete my list. So the playlists are the videos I actually watched. If I haven't watched your video, leave it linked for me because now that some time has passed, I am more interested to watch more favorites videos, so I would love to watch yours if I haven't already. So if you don't see your name included, let me know and I'll watch it. Just to make it easier on myself, I just wanted a top 10, 15, 24 or whatever list. I didn't want like, I read 250 books and these are them ranked. I didn't want to do that because that would take up too much of my time. I didn't add awards videos or superlative videos. I just wanted a straight up list of this is my top whatever books or romances of the year. So those were the videos I watched. I think that is what I wanted to talk about. I didn't include my own video, even though some I will mention whenever a book was on my own favorites list, but I will have my video linked for you if you're interested to watch it. I will have the tier ranking here. So just like if you watched my Goodreads choice video, then it's going to be similar to that. If you haven't, I'll also leave that linked for you. And I will also leave the video I did last year that was similar to this one. Last year I did the top 10 and I watched, I believe, 100 videos. But some books I mentioned I had already read for that vlog. I think that is all I wanted to say. So yeah, 242 videos. If you're wondering, do I have a life? I do not. I do not have a life, in fact. I will be having one next week. Like my next week is going to be chock full. I also have a date next week, which I'm not looking forward to, but hey ho, you got to do what you have to do out there in these streets, I guess. I don't know why I felt the need to mention that, but nothing wrong with watching 242 videos, by the way. I think I watched it in like 2 weeks. So about 120 videos. And I also was reading at the same time and also was doing other things. So last month, I was just hermiting in my little hermit hole, watching videos and reading books, and that is okay, you know? Let's get started. Okay, so I'll be showing the books on this side and everybody that has mentioned it, you'll see on this side. So number 15 is the Rebel Blue Ranch series by Lila Sage. This series was mentioned 26 times. Once the whole series was mentioned. Done and Dusted was mentioned 6 times. Swift and Saddled was mentioned 7 times. And Lost and Lassoed was mentioned 12 times. Of this series, I only read Swift and Saddled. I read it for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I thought this was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It was not my favorite. I do, however, have a strong suspicion that I will love Done and Dusted more, but I know, like, something in me tells me I'm gonna love Lost and Lassoed a lot. So maybe next year, Lost and Lassoed will make it into my own favorites list, but Lost and Lassoed just has so many tropes that I tend to love. But the Rebel Blue Ranch series follows this family of cowboys and each family member getting a romance. The first book is The Sister, and then Swift and Saddled is Weston, and then Lost and Lassoed is the older brother Gus, I believe. So yes, 26 people had one or multiple books in their favorites list. Can you see that? I think so. Oh. I think so. Then 3 books and series actually share the 14th spot. They were all mentioned 27 times. So the first 14th spot goes to the Letters of Enchantment series by Rebecca Ross. So one person mentioned both books, 17 people mentioned Divine Rivals, and then 9 people mentioned Ruthless Vows. So I actually read Divine Rivals for my video last year, reading Booktube's favorite 2023 romances, and I really enjoyed it. I gave Divine Rivals 4.5 stars, and I gave Ruthless Vows 5 stars. I read both of them this year, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. They didn't make it into my own favorites video, but I definitely can see the hype. I 100% agree with Booktube. I can see why people really love this series. But I do have to say with this one, beware of your expectations, because if you really love fantasy, if you really love world building, then this is not your series. Basically, this is a amalgamation of 3 different genres. It is a historical fiction, fantasy, romance. And there's not a lot of world building. It's mainly, think of it as a historical fiction, magical realism, basically. But I really enjoyed it. I definitely agree with Booktube on this one. So for those of you who don't know, this is a series where you follow two rivals. They both work as journalists, but they also actually correspond through this magical typewriter. So Iris is the female main character, and she, let me actually hold this one up. So this takes place in a world similar to like World War I or World War II, but instead of like nations fighting each other, it's actually gods fighting each other, and they're using humans to fight their wars. And Iris's brother went off to war, but he hasn't been writing them. So she fears the worst. So she starts writing to him on her typewriter and slips her letters through her closet door. And then one day somebody actually answers back. So she realizes either her closet is magical or her typewriter is magical. And she starts talking to somebody, and he very quickly realizes who she is. She doesn't know who he is. And he is actually Roman, who is her rival at the paper she works for. And then once she realizes it's not her brother writing back to her, she goes off to the war front to try and find her brother. So she becomes a war correspondent. And once he realizes that, he actually goes after her. And while they're at the front, feelings develop. And like I said, I really loved it. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, check out the video I did last year. Or any of the... Can you see that? Or check out any of the other people who mentioned... But I cannot see right. Can you see that? I think so. And otherwise, too bad, so sad. Okay, no, you can actually see it. I actually have a couple other books down here, so maybe you'll see them. Anyway, hey-ho. I cannot do anything about that. Definitely agree with Booktube on this one. The next series that is in 14th place is the Empyrean series. All right, I'm editing this video and I realized my mistake. The Empyrean series was not mentioned 27 times. It was mentioned 29 times, which means it's not in 14th place. It's actually in 13th place, which means the Rebel Blue Ranch series is technically not in the top 15, but I already made my mistake. I dug my grave. I have to lie in it. Anyway, I made this mistake. It is what it is. I'm not changing the video now. So know that the Empyrean series technically should be in number 13th spot. I don't know how I missed this, but I did. Hopefully it was my only mistake. So 2 people mentioned the entire series. 14 people mentioned Fourth Wing. And then 13 people mentioned Iron Flame. So I, for some reason, don't own Iron Flame. I read both books. I gave both of them 5 stars. I can definitely see why a lot of people love this series so much. I am highly anticipating the third one that comes out next week. I actually did a vlog for both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, so I'll leave both those vlogs linked for you. If you have been living under a rock that you don't know what Fourth Wing is about, so I'll quickly talk about it for those people. So it's actually a fantasy romance involving dragons and this girl who's very weak. Like her body is weak. So she always thought that she was going to be a scribe and not a dragon rider, but her mother forces her to be one. And then she comes in contact with a guy who seems to hate her, but they're dragons are mated. So now they're forced to spend time together, and his name is Zayden, and he's a shadow daddy, and he's very hot, and it's their romance. The second book leaves off on a cliffhanger. I know a lot of people were disappointed with Iron Flame. I really enjoyed it. So like I said, I'm very highly anticipating Onyx Storm, but I definitely agree with Booktube. Fourth Wing, I believe, made it onto my honorable mentions last year. So like I said, both of them 5 stars. Definitely agree with Booktube on this one. And the last series that was mentioned 27 times and was in 14th spot is actually one I did not read prior to this video, so you'll see vlog clips of me reading the first one, but it's the Kindred's Curse series by Penn Cole. So 5 people mentioned the entire series, 9 people mentioned Spark of the Everflame, 10 people mentioned Glow of the Everflame, and 3 people mentioned Heat of the Everflame. So let's cue to me reading Spark of the Everflame. So I'm currently reading Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. So I actually started this book yesterday, but I only got 25 pages in, and I have to finish this today because I have to upload this video today. So I have to read like 350 pages in one day. So I'm listening to the audiobook at the same time to get me through it as fast as I can. So I heard from a lot of people, including all the people that have this series in their favorites, that the first book is not a lot of people's favorite book in the series. It's mostly the other books in the series. So I am kind of setting my expectations for that. Right now, as I'm reading it, I can definitely see the potential, but I can also see why this might not be everybody's favorite. So this is a world. Okay, so how do I explain it? So basically in this world, you have mortals and you have descendants. And descendants are literally descended of... Okay, so let me just read you what it says here. So, millennia ago, 9 immortal siblings known as the Kindred crafted a magical pact, the Forging, after seeking refuge in our world following the violent destruction of their own. Each of the Kindred fell in love with a citizen of our nation of Amarion. Rather than watch their beloveds wither to old age and die, the Kindred agreed to abandon their eternal youth and bind their lives to their immortal loves. Through the Forging spell, Amarion was broken up into 9 realms, each named for one of the Kindred and infused with its patrons' gods or goddesses' respective magic. The Kindred had intended for the offspring of their unions, the race of beings we now call the Descended, to rule over those realms and usher in an era of peace and prosperity, with both races living together in harmony. That is not really what happened. So basically you have 9 realms. Each realm has a particular magic tied to it, and these Descended, if you're from a particular realm, you can only use that magic as a descendant. And if you travel to a different realm, then your magic won't work anymore. So for example, the realm where DM lives, our main character, is called Lumnos. Lumnos, realm of light and shadow. So the descendants there can use either light or shadow or both. And DM is a human, or so she thinks. I don't know. Like, I don't have any concrete proof, but I don't think she's human at all. Her mother disappeared 6 months ago, and DM actually saw her mother talk to a descendant the day she disappeared. Her mother has been keeping all these secrets about herself, but mostly about DM. DM doesn't know who her birth father is. She's been raised by her stepfather, who she loves, like she considers him her own father. And her mother has been tight-lipped about who her sire is, who her biological father is. She never really told DM. DM doesn't know. DM has interesting colored eyes. So in this world, how you can see whether somebody is mortal or descended is that mortals only have brown eyes, whereas descended have all sorts of different colored eyes. DM has silver eyes, and she claims that it's because she got, like, they used to be brown, but she got sick when she was like 9, and that turned her eye color. She has been using this powder almost her entire life because when she was younger, she would get these hallucinations. But ever since her mother disappeared, she stopped using the powder, and now these hallucinations are coming back. Or are they hallucinations? Her mother was a healer, and DM is one too. And basically, there's different rules to heal descendants as there are to mortals, because descendants, they are like very strong. They're able to heal themselves, and like their skin is basically impenetrable. Only a few substances can penetrate a descendant's skin. And her mother has been keeping DM away from descendants at all costs. But now, of course, her mother is not there to protect her, and her mother has been a healer for the palace, and now they need a new healer, so DM volunteers. And when she's at the palace, she meets Luther, the king's nephew, and she realizes that it was Luther who talked to her mother the day she disappeared, so she's trying to get close to him to figure out what happened to her mom. Also, her best friend / lover is in this rebellion group who wants to get rid of the descendants so that they can take their land back, because it used to be all mortals before these kindreds came to their land. So he is recruiting DM to also like spy for his rebellion group. So that is basically all that is happening. So this is supposed to be a fantasy romance, and I know for sure it's between DM and Luther. So far, nothing really has happened. Like, we've had like 2 meaningful interactions between them. So I don't think anything really romantic is going to happen in the first book. I think that's going to happen in like the second or third book, I guess. So far, so the only reason I'm reading this so fast is because I have a deadline. I think this would have taken me a lot longer had I been reading this not for this vlog. because so far, aside from everything I just told you, is more backstory, world building. So far, not much, like nothing really interesting has happened so far. I'm just like trudging along with DM, trying to figure out like what is going on. But I feel like she didn't, like so far where I'm at, and I am over halfway through, I'm on page 224. She didn't make any significant progress into finding things out about her mother. She just got recruited into this rebellion group. And I don't care about her interactions with her friend because I know that's not going to be the guy she's going to end up with. I do have to say, so the plot is not really that intriguing for me at this point, and DM is kind of annoying me. So she describes herself. So there was this scene that just made me chuckle because that is exactly what she's like. So she says, a smarter DM might have remembered that she was supposed to be acting obedient and loyal to prove herself worthy of these people. A smarter DM might have let the stranger manhandle her a bit if it convinced him she wasn't here to cause trouble. But I had always been an act first, think later kind of girl. And that is exactly who she is. Like, I get it. Like, I like these fierce, feisty heroines. I always have. But I also like smart heroines. And I don't feel like she's being smart at all. Like, the amount of time this girl has gotten into trouble unnecessarily, it baffles the mind. Like, pretty much every interaction she has with somebody other than her loved ones has ended in chaos and her almost either dying or killing somebody else. And I'm already sick of that. So I cannot even like comprehend how I'm gonna feel if that's gonna happen even more times. I am really enjoying the side characters, I do have to say. And I like, mostly what I like about them is I like her interactions with them. So I like her interactions with like her aunt type figure, Mora. I like her interactions with her brother. When she does her healing, and especially when she interacts with kids, I am really endeared to her. I love the way she is with kids and how she puts them at ease. And when she's a healer, it doesn't really matter if she's healing a mortal or a descendant. So I do like that. So I'm already a fan of the world building. So this is the map, basically. So you can see like basically so there's like 9 different realms for these 9 kindreds. And like I said, each one of them has a different type of magic. And some realms humans can enter and some realms they are not allowed. The king in their realm is dying, and they think Luther's gonna be has the best chance of being his predecessor. So that is like overarching a plot line that is happening in the background, but so far nothing has happened with that either. So far I'm liking it, but it doesn't have any 5-star feels for me at this point. And to me, it does feel like a setup book to set up like the rest of the story, which is fine sometimes. Like for example, like a lot of books are like that. Like obviously A Court of Thorns and Roses is not, in my opinion, not the strongest book in the ACOTAR series. Same goes for the Throne of Glass series. I don't think, like for a lot of people, Throne of Glass is just not their favorite. And it's definitely, like, if you look at what the series becomes, like, Throne of Glass is nothing like the rest of the series, you know what I mean? But like I said, there are definite things that I like about it, and I can see myself enjoying this series, especially if what everybody else says is correct and the sequels are going to be even better. So I'm going to just trudge along. Right now it is 3:39. And I wanted to upload this at 6, but I don't think I can because I still need to finish it, do my final update, and finish editing this vlog. So probably my video is going to be... Anyway, that's neither here nor there because you can only see it. But I think I'm going to upload it later than usual. But I mean, like I said, that's not interesting for you since if you're watching this, it has already been uploaded. So I'm gonna stop babbling now and continue reading. And I do like the audiobook, by the way. I like the narrator. She speaks a little bit slower, which means I can speed up the audiobook, which gets me through this book faster. So yes. So I've been craving sushi for a week now, so I got some. I think it's a bit too much for me alone, but I don't care. I'm gonna eat as much as I can. Can't wait. Okay, so I'm on page 299 and DM is really starting to annoy me. So without spoiling it too much, so she, like I told you, has been recruited for the rebellion group. Like she has given them information. And now she's acting all high and mighty and offended and surprised when that leads to violence. It's like, girl, what did you expect them to do? Like, did you honestly think I'm gonna tell them this information and I'm gonna tell them how to, like, for example, she gives them information on like an armory. Like, what did you expect them to do? Like, send puppies in and therefore free themselves from years of oppression? Like, such a dumb girl. Like, I get it, okay? But when has a revolution ever been won without violence? You know what I mean? And they made their intentions clear. So you cannot act surprised when actual violence happens. You know what I mean? So not a very smart girl. Anyway, we'll see what is gonna happen. All right, I'm back a couple hours later. And if you are wondering, did this girl ever move from her spot? The answer is no, not really. Like, I went to eat a little bit and but mostly I've just been reading. So I finished Spark of the Everflame. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. Obviously, I have not read the sequels yet, but already I can understand why people think this is the weakest in the series. To me, the last 100 pages were the best ones. I was so intrigued. It was so action-packed. The romance was starting to build a little, like Luther and DM had some scenes together, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Luther, sometimes he made some decisions that were just as stupid as DM's, but I do like him. And what I like about this book is, same with another book in this vlog that I read, is so far, I mean, I feel like as much as she made some stupid decisions, I could sometimes sympathize with her. There were people she cared about that were solidly on different sides. After finishing the first book, I obviously still have a lot of questions. I want to know what DM is. I mean, I guess I can think of what she is, but I don't. I think there's something other with her. Like, I don't know, like without going into spoiler territory. And I'm wondering about her mom. Like, what is her mom's deal? Like, what is, like, there's so many questions still about her mom. And yeah, the way it ended, I'm very intrigued. Like, I kind of want to read book 2 right away. Did I have any other thoughts? No, I think I mentioned everything, honestly. So 4 stars. I was debating whether or not I would give it 3.5 stars, but I think 4 stars is solid because at the end of the day, I did finish this entire book in a day, even though it was 400 pages. I was intrigued. I did want to continue on. And yes, I was reading it for a vlog, but if I really was disliking it, I would have just DNF'd. And I never in a million years was I ever inclined to do that. I kept flipping the pages. I wanted to know, like, there were just questions that I just wanted answered. And even though DM, yes, she was infuriating, I could sympathize with her. Like, I get it. Obviously, in a perfect world, you wouldn't hurt anybody. And I like how in this book, she was challenged for her beliefs too, even though, yeah, I kind of think Henry's a dick, but he also has his reasonings, you know what I mean? A lot of people really love the second book, so Glow of the Everflame. So I don't know when I can get around to it, but I really want to read it soon. I'm just gonna stop now because I need to edit this video and upload it. If I have any urgent thoughts, I'll leave it in the description, but I don't think I do. I thought this was thoroughly entertaining, 4 stars, and I have very high expectations for the sequels now, so can't wait. As of filming this video, I actually hadn't started this book yet, so you know before me what I thought of this book, but let's put it here. And these 3 books were in 14th spot. Now, there are 2 books or series that share the 13th position. The first one is the Court of Thorns and Roses series. So this one was mentioned 32 times. I am literally surrounded by books. Like, I have built a fort of books for myself. Okay, so 8 people mentioned the entire series. 1 person mentioned A Court of Thorns and Roses. 10 people mentioned A Court of Mist and Fury. 6 people mentioned A Court of Wings and Ruin. 1 person mentioned A Court of Frost and Starlight. And 6 people mentioned A Court of Silver Flames. So, as you can see by my old editions, I have read and loved this series for a very long time. I actually started reading it when it came out. Sarah J. Maas is my favorite author. A Court of Mist and Fury is one of my favorite books of all time. I, just like everybody else, really love her books. And I obviously 100% agree with Booktube. Now, the other one that is in 13th spot was also mentioned 32 times, which is a feat since this is not a series, it's a standalone, but it's one that I actually do not agree with Booktube on, and it's The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. So 32 people mentioned this book, and I actually read it for the Goodreads Choice Awards of 2023, and back then, it also had a lot of hype, and I just assumed I was gonna love it, and I was so disappointed that I didn't. I just assumed I was gonna love it just like everybody else. This, I gave 3 stars, so I didn't hate it by any means, but to me, it felt more women's fiction and less so a romance. I felt like this could have been so heartbreakingly beautiful had we gotten the male point of view, but we really didn't. And I think that is ultimately why I didn't love it as much. If you want to know my full thoughts, check out my Goodreads Choice Awards video I did in 2023. And I also think this will hit you a little bit harder if you have actually really dealt with somebody close to you dying. And I thankfully have not experienced that. So I think the grief of losing somebody was really, a lot of people that love this book really mentioned that. So I think that is also something that people love about this book. And like I said, thankfully I have not really experienced that, so maybe that's why it doesn't hit me as much. But this book, you follow Clementine, and 6 months ago she lost her aunt, who was like almost her best friend, and her aunt left her this apartment, and her aunt was like this kooky figure who always said things where Clementine was like, yeah, whatever. But her aunt, so one of the things her aunt used to tell her was that her apartment was magical, and Clementine was like, yeah, whatever, that's just my kooky aunt. But since she inherits the apartment, she now has to live there. One day she steps into the apartment to a guy cooking in her apartment, and she's like, what are you doing here? Leave. And he's like, but I'm renting this apartment. And she's like, but I live here, so that's not true. So while he's explaining who he is, she realizes that this man is actually from the past, from 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, she and her aunt were on vacation, and her aunt was subletting the apartment, and that guy is from that time. So basically there's like this time warp where every once in a while she will go into her apartment and it will be 7 years in the past. So this guy is like 7 years younger than her, and eventually they start falling in love. But this guy's present self is walking around out there knowing that the love of his life does not know who he is. And that to me is just so heartbreaking, and I just wished we had his point of view, because that just sounds like torture. He now is a chef, and she works for a publishing house, and he is getting a book deal, but he's being very cold to her and she doesn't know why. And it's, like I said, I even though this was not for me, I can definitely see why a lot of people really love it. And even though this book was released last year or in 2023, it still holds up, because even in 2024, 32 people have put it in their favorites list. So definitely check it out if it sounds interesting to you. In 12th spot is the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. This series was mentioned 33 times. 4 people mentioned House of Earth and Blood. 6 people mentioned House of Sky and Breath. And 23 people mentioned House of Flame and Shadow. So I obviously also read House of Flame and Shadow this year, and this one didn't make it onto my own top 10 list. I do think that had I made a top 15 list, it might have made it. So this is definitely my least favorite series by Sarah J. Maas. And as much as while I'm reading it, I am thoroughly entertained, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, but I don't find myself thinking about these characters once I close the book. And like I said, like while I'm reading it, I'm definitely rooting for them, I'm shipping them, I'm looking up fan art of them, but these characters don't have a chokehold on me, not like the characters from ACOTAR or Throne of Glass. And that is fine, not every series can be your favorite. And this one, I think the reason why this one didn't hit me as hard is because I read it really weird. First of all, I hadn't read House of Sky and Breath until beginning of this year, so that should tell you enough about my feelings about this series. Even though I gave it 5 stars, I gave every one of them 5 stars, but I was in a giant reading slump when this book came out, so the plan was to read it the end of 2023, and I just didn't get around to it, so I had to scramble to read it right before the release date of this one. And then when this one came out, I read the first half So like about 400 pages in one day. And then it took me 2 weeks to read the other 400 pages. So my reading experience was just very jumbled and weird. And it was also a very busy work week. That's why it took me 2 weeks to read. So I don't know. Even though I did, like, I know a lot of people were disappointed. I really wasn't. But it just didn't make it onto my favorites. And I do have to say, and I know I am the odd one out here because I know a lot of people do love it. Oh, let me put this one here. I tend to, I don't know why I have this personality trait, but I always get annoyed when an author jumbles series together. It's like, in my mind, these were completely different series, completely different characters. Why you gotta mix them? And obviously she's mixing them, and she's doing that in this series. So that I think that is also what's kind of putting me off. But I have to come to terms with that because these characters are gonna mingle, and they're gonna mingle also probably in my other favorite series. So I just need to accept that. And then in the 11th spot is The Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillick. So 7 people mentioned the entire duology, 20 people mentioned One Dark Window, and 7 people mentioned Two Twisted Crowns. So as you can see, I am currently reading this book, so let's switch to my vlog clips of reading this one. I'm currently reading One Dark Window by Rachel Gillick. This is the first book in the Shepherd King duology. This book has 3 parts, and I just finished the first part, the cards. So this book, you follow Elspeth Spindle. She lives in a world where there's magic, and the magic is basically through cards. So in this world there are 78 cards, and there's 12 different cards. Okay, so how do I explain this? There's actually an Instagram page that gives you an explanation, which I'll leave linked for you, but basically there are 12 different cards, and each card has a different amount of them made. So you have one type of card that has 12 cards, I guess, that are the same. Then you have one that's 11, then 10, 9, 8, so on and so forth until you get 78 cards in total. And the only way to use magic is through those cards. That's the only legal way to use magic. So basically, whenever you touch the card, it will give you a type of ability. So for example, the mirror card, there's 3 of them in the entire world. It grants you invisibility. But each and every single card also has a consequence for using it too much. And for the mirror card, it lifts the veil between worlds, exposing world of ghosts. So if there is magic, you can use it. It will grant you abilities, but use it too much and it will have a side effect, and most of the time the side effect is worse than the ability gained. What is illegal, however, is using magic not through these cards. And Elspeth actually is magical because she had this fever, and anybody that has this fever will get magic. And the king wants all of those people who get that fever executed because they will inevitably also go mad in some way. Like the consequence for having that magic will, what's that called? Will corrupt them. So that's why everybody that has this fever will be killed. I have to say, it's funny. You're seeing this before the other 2 books I read that have similar plots. But 3 books that I'm reading for this vlog have similar plots in that there's these rules and our main character is the one that has these secret abilities that basically should be hunted down, or doesn't have a certain ability, I guess. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So her ability is that she can, anytime she touches a card, she will absorb the ability. And when she was 9, she touched the Nightmare card, which there's only 2 of those out there. And the Nightmare card allows you to speak into other people's minds, but the consequence is it reveals one's deepest fears. So when she touched the card, the Nightmare actually inserted itself into her brain, and ever since she was 9, it keeps yapping in her brain, basically. So she's been possessed by this Nightmare, and the Nightmare has been helping her whenever she asks for help, but so far he hasn't done anything aside from yapping in her brain. Then she meets this mysterious highwayman on the forest road, and then she realizes who said highwayman is, he's actually the king's cousin. He needs her help because the nightmare allows her to see other cards out there. So Elsbeth, because of the nightmare in her head, can actually see it's called the Providence cards, I guess. So she can actually see the Providence cards on other people, even if they are hiding the card, even if she herself is blindfolded. And he needs to find all of these cards, because if you have one set, it allows you to okay, so basically this has such a convoluted plot, I'm sorry. So there's another thing going on. There's this mist, this forest, and anytime you wander into the mist, you die basically, or you go mad, or you get absorbed into the woods. And if you have a full set of cards, you can remove the mist, but you can also decide to remove, like, to heal somebody who is magical. So the highwayman, the king's nephew, he has a brother who is magical and is slowly going mad, who the king wants to use as a sacrifice to remove the mist. And he wants to save his brother, of course. So basically, both the king and his cousin are battling, without the king knowing, for the final card, because there's one card out there that has only been made once. There's no other in existence, and it's the Twin Elders card, and that one will allow you to commune with the Blunders, which is the land they live in is called Blunder. Ancient entity, the spirit of the wood. So since there's only one out there, it hasn't been found for 500 years, and Raven, the king's cousin, wants Elspeth to find that card for him. She agrees because she wants to save herself. Let me just scoot around. Yeah, okay. She agrees because she wants to save herself too, since she also is afraid of eventually going mad. And in order to justify them spending so much time together, he has to pretend to court her. So first of all, I really like this magic system. I really love tarot cards. I actually collect some. Actually wanted to show you my Jane Austen tarot deck. I think that is definitely fitting for my channel, which I'll show you that one in a bit. But what I most love is that magic has real and severe consequences in this book. I always love it in fantasies when using magic has stakes. I know Brandon Sanderson talks about that a lot, and I think that is an excellent way to use magic in your world, because otherwise there are no stakes. Like, if magic has no consequences, then people can use it willy-nilly and there's no real stakes. Whereas in this book, it has stakes. Like, yes, you can be powerful. You can, let me read you some of the powers. Like, you can become rich. You can see the future. You can get immense courage. You can use truth serums on people. You can be invisible. But if you use it too much, there are severe consequences. And I think I just love that type of magic system. Also love the fact that it's these cards that are magical. So there are 78 of them in the world. You can trade them, and basically whoever holds the card has the power. So if you lose it or if somebody steals it from you, then there goes your magic, which that's also obviously an interesting thing. And I like the prophecy. What I also really love is each chapter starts off with usually like a poem describing either the cards or describing the future, which I love. I love poems in books. It really reminds me of Harry Potter, especially like the Sorting Hat songs. I just like it when there is like some sort of prophecy or something. And especially if there's rhyming in there, like that is something I just love. This apparently is a debut novel, which I am so impressed by Rachel Gillick. I love her writing style. I love some of the sentences I'm reading. I like this magic system. I like these characters. I'm just thoroughly impressed and entertained. One thing that is kind of annoying, and it wouldn't have been annoying if I wasn't reading this for a vlog and there was a time constraint, is that I am reading this a little bit slower. I don't know what it is, probably the writing style, honestly, but this is not a fast-paced book. not at all, at least not where I'm at now in part 1. Maybe in like the part 3 it will be fast paced. I am finding that I'm reading this slower than, for example, some of the other books I'm reading for this vlog, but that wouldn't have bothered me if I didn't have to finish this plus read another book in like 3 days. So I do think I can. So right now it is like 9 o'clock. So right now I'm on page 159 of like 392. So I hope to get to page 190. Oh, I can definitely accomplish that. Maybe even a little bit more. We'll see. Was there anything else I wanted to say? Oh yeah, I just wanted to read you one quote. That's how the best lies are told, with just enough truth to be convincing. So like I said, I love it. One thing I do have to say is right now where I'm at, I'm not really that intrigued with the romance. I'm more interested in the plot and to see what's gonna happen. So I have to see about the romance. Right now where I am at, she's traveling to his house because his family's also in on the plot and they want her at their house so they can keep an eye on her and work together to convince the town and her parents that like that is a good thing, like to like not for it to be scandalous. They are saying that he's courting her. I am interested to see how that's going to develop. Like when they're actually in forced proximity living together, hopefully we'll get some good scenes. Oh, and what I also really love is the monster in her head. I just love the way they talk to each other. I like him so far. I have my thoughts as to who the monster could actually be, so I'm interested to see if that's going to be revealed in this book. I always like it in books when there's somebody talking in somebody else's head. I love that in Wolf Gone Wild. I ate those scenes up, and I really love it in Fourth Wing. So, and I'm really enjoying it here. Yeah, I am debating when I can update you next. Either after part 2, or just when I finish it, because part 3 is not that long. Yeah, part 3 is like 50 pages or something. So, thoroughly entertaining. And let's actually show you these Jane Austen cards. I don't know if I can show it to you here. Well, maybe. Let's see if you can see them. Let me scooch over. Okay, so it says here, it's inspired by Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Sense and Sensibility. I don't think you can get this deck anymore, actually, but let's show you some. Oh yeah, okay, so each ace card has a book of Jane Austen. So this one is Sense and Sensibility. And this one is the Ace of Pentacles. Okay, so I believe this is the Ace of Wands and it's Pride and Prejudice. I think this is also a Pride and Prejudice scene. I don't know if you can see that. The Seven of Cups. Ace of Cups is Persuasion. The Ten of Cups. The Wheel of Fortune. Ace of Swords is Emma. Let me show you one more. Maybe the Lovers, if I can find it. Yes, the Lovers. So I obviously wanted this deck. Oh, the Six of Cups is cute. I obviously wanted this deck because it has to do with books and Jane Austen. And yeah, I don't even know if that was interesting for you, but hey ho. I'm going to continue reading and you'll see me tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm actually filming the rest, like the not vlog portion of this video. So that's going to take me a long time, I think. So I think I'll also just do my update for One Dark Window during that sit down part. If I have finished the book by then, we'll see. So I just finished One Dark Window and I think I'm going to give it 5 stars. Part of me was debating whether I should give it 4.5 stars, but for what? I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I do have to say, I wouldn't consider this a fantasy romance. Like, not at all. Actually, I feel like it's a fantasy with a romance subplot. And I liked the romance, but it was not the main focus of the story at all. With fantasy romance, in my opinion, it like half of it needs to be romance, and this definitely wasn't. That wasn't the case in this book. Having said that, I mean, obviously, as much as I love romance, I also love fantasy, so I can enjoy a book if it's not like an actual fantasy romance. I was mesmerized by this book. I thought, first of all, I like everything I said before still stands, and I have to say, like, there were some points in this book where I felt like I was transported, and I was feeling whatever Elspeth was feeling. Like at one point, like there was a scene where she was fighting against telling the truth, and she described it as almost choking, and I felt like I was choking. I loved the way she described the setting, this like misty place, and it helped that in the Netherlands right now there's a lot of mist going on. Like it's very like heavy mist, so I felt like I was like in this place. But I also like, not just because it's misty here, I think she did a wonderful job with the atmosphere. I really love her writing style. I continue to really love all these poems in here. Let me read you one. When the shadows grow long, when our names turn to dust, what we loved, what we hated will spoil to rust. All will be forgotten, save one truth unshaken. What did we do when the children were taken? You know, I love in these kinds of stories where, so like I said before, in this vlog, you'll see me reading multiple books where there is one group that is most certainly oppressed. They're being hunted down and executed just for the fact that either they're born a different way or something happened to them that made them a different way. And that is basically what that poem talks about. Like the children who are infected, they get taken and either used by the king or executed. And this basically says, you know, what were you doing? Just standing by while horrible things were happening. And obviously it is an analogy for things that have happened in the past, but are still happening now. Like if you look at like the whole Palestine thing, a lot of people are just willing to forget about it and just ignore it when it like there are, like it is horrible what is happening there. And you know, I wonder in 50, 100 years time when the history books are written, whether everybody can look themselves in the eye and say that they did the right thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Well, I mean, it is, but that's why I always find it so interesting when people say, like when big events are happening, like I'm just a reader. I don't like politics, or I don't do politics. Most books, especially like a lot of fantasy books, definitely mirror things that happen in our world. And I thought she did a beautiful job. Like I started following her on Instagram. I just want to read anything this woman will ever write. So there's a book coming out in May, which I'll be pre-ordering and reading as soon as it's in my hand. I'm planning on reading the sequel because it does leave on a big cliffhanger. I want to read it in February. As far as the romance is concerned, the second half definitely had a little bit more romance, and I did enjoy their scenes together. I really loved them together. I definitely was loving all their interactions, but I stand by what I said earlier. It's just not a fantasy romance, especially if I compare it to these young adult fantasies I'm gonna be reading. It's not a fantasy romance. I think people who love like Catherine Arden, I think might really love this book. Even though I read the first book in that series and I didn't really love it, but I do think I read it at the wrong time, which is, what is that series called? The Bear and the Nightingale. And here it's compared to, or no, on Goodreads, I think. Yeah, so they compare the second book at least, or the first book, to For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten and The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I haven't read those books, so I would highly recommend this to just about anybody, but adjust your expectations. This is not a fantasy romance. And even like, so there's one sex scene in here and it's not explicit at all. So I do think people can read this who don't really love a lot of smut in their books. Oh yeah, one thing I did, there's one big criticism here, and without spoiling it, so she, like I said, she has this being inside her brain. And I figured out about halfway through the story behind it without spoiling it. Like I had a theory and it turned out that I was right. And Elspeth is described as somebody who's very smart, perceptive, and knows a lot of things. So it just doesn't make sense to me that 11 years with this being inside her head and she didn't have an inkling as to who or what this being could be. And I get that at the point where she was at, she was in a position to get more answers than when she was still living with her aunt. But I don't know. I feel like with the amount of time this nightmare talks in her head, she should have figured it out, because she technically had all the information available to her even before she went to this other place in this book. Okay, I think the only people who know what I'm talking about are people who actually read this book. I am interested to see what is going to happen in the second book. I already own it, so very excited to read that one. Did I have any other thoughts? I think those are my thoughts. Oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to say is I really love these characters. I very much loved the main character and her love interest, but also the side characters. I thought they were pretty well fleshed out. I enjoyed them all. And I also like how all of them had giant flaws. They were definitely not perfect, but you're still rooted for them. And I also like that there are some characters that are still mysterious to me, like her cousin, for example. I just want to know more about her and her, like what is going to happen to her, but also what her motives were, I guess. And like there are clear villains, but I also enjoy reading about them, you know? I feel like she did a wonderful job. Obviously books, or a lot of people have certain things they love in books. Either it's the plot or the writing style or the characters. And I do feel like in this book, she did a good job with all three of those things. I think the plot was very intriguing and interesting. I thought the characters are very interesting. And I thought the writing is beautiful. And then obviously the magic system I really loved. I do have to say, especially in the second part, it did feel like it was a little bit slow, but I didn't mind it. I felt like it suited the story very well. But there was still a plot. Like they were still trying to get all these cards, you know what I mean? And especially like the last 50 pages, I was on the edge of my seat wanting to know what was gonna happen. Yeah, but like I said in earlier updates, like this is a slower book. Like it is a little bit under 400 pages. To me, it felt like I had read like a 500-page book. Definitely a book to savor a little bit and take your time with, in my opinion. So those are my thoughts. So once again, just like with Spark of the Everflame, you will know my full thoughts before me. But right now where I'm at, halfway through, I am thoroughly entertained. So far, we'll see for the other half, I am agreeing with Booktube. So now for the top 10. In 10th spot is the Crimson Moth series by Crescent City. 37 people mentioned this series, 35 of which mentioned the Crimson Moth or the Heartless Hunter. It depends on where you are in the world, what the title is. And then 2 people actually mentioned Rebel Witch. That book hasn't come out yet. I also read this book for this vlog, so I'll switch to the vlog clips. Okay, so I'm currently reading the Crimson Moth, aka, what's the American one? Heartless Hunter. Okay, so I'm reading this a bit slower than I wanted to. In fact, I think there was a couple books that I really wanted to read, and I don't think I'm gonna get around to all of them. But anyway, I'm on page 243, so almost done. I need to read about 150 pages to finish the book. Yesterday I didn't read as much as I wanted to. Anyway, I am really, really loving this book. So the Crimson Moth, aka the Heartless Hunter. You follow this witch and this witch hunter falling in love. So you follow Rune and Gideon, and this basically takes place 2 years after this revolution. And before the revolution, the witches ruled this country, it seems like. You had these 3 witch queens and they were powerful, and then one day Gideon and his brother and an entire revolution killed those 3 witches, and therefore now, oh no, the witch hunters are coming. Now the world looks entirely different and witches are now the ones being hunted. So anyone that has been proven to be a witch gets executed. And the way to see if somebody's a witch is that they have these casting scars. So anytime a witch does a spell, she has to use blood, preferably fresh blood, preferably her own blood. And anytime she cuts herself and uses that blood in a spell, the scar will be silver. So Rune, our other main character, she is a witch in hiding. So she 2 years ago turned in her grandmother because her best friend Alex told her to. Alex is Gideon's little brother. Well, little brother. He's his brother. And Gideon and Rune are friends, or Alex and Rune are friends, and Alex, alongside another friend of hers, have been helping her save these witches because she's the Crimson Moth. And the Crimson Moth has been saving witches from being executed for 2 years now. And Gideon thinks he's closing in on the Crimson Moth, and he thinks Rune is the Crimson Moth, so he, which she is. So he is courting her, trying to see if she has these scars, and meanwhile, Rune is trying to seduce Gideon into giving her his secrets because he is a high-ranking commander in this new regime, basically. So she knows that he has all the secrets, and if she can spell him into giving her all his secrets, she could save more witches. And this basically takes place in this, like, historical setting. So you have these aristos, aka aristocrats, and he's definitely from the lower classes. One thing So this definitely reminds me of Serpent and Dove. I've not read Serpent and Dove yet, and thinking I really want to read it to compare the two, but his backstory very much reminds me of Rhysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses. So there is definitely like heavy alluding to sexual assault in the past, which that is just heartbreaking. I always hate reading that, and it makes sense why he hates witches so much. But obviously it also makes sense that not all witches are evil. Like, it seems like just, like, obviously any species can be evil, but it seems in this world it was most definitely these witch queens that were evil, but not all of them are, obviously. I am thoroughly enjoying myself. Like, so far it's looking like it's gonna be a 5 stars. I am so very much entertained. Even though this is YA, it definitely doesn't read it. Especially, like I said, they don't shy away from sex and talking about his past and everything that happened there. So it seems like it's like upper YA. It seems like Throne of Glass level YA. So I do tend to, that is like the sweet spot for me for these kinds of romantasies. I think this would have been amazing as a adult romantasy as well, but I do like where it's placed now. I believe this is only a duology, and I believe the second book comes out next month, so I'm definitely going to be reading it. I am very much enjoying myself. I can sympathize with both characters. And what I also like is that this also has like a little bit of a triangle, a love triangle, because he knows that Alex, his brother, really likes Rune. So even though, so he has this moral dilemma. Should he seduce Rune, who he also finds attractive? And if he succeeds and she turns out to not be the Crimson Moth, then he will have betrayed his brother. But if he seduces her and turns out that she is the Crimson Moth, then he will have saved his brother. And what he wants to do in life is basically keep his brother from harm because of everything that happened to his family, because pretty much it's just him and his brother. Everybody else has died. Like, his mission in life now is to keep Alex safe. So I do like, and I like their flirtations together. Like I said, I'm rooting for both of them. You get both point of views. So when I'm in his chapters, I'm like, yeah, I get why you're doing what you're doing. But then obviously when I'm in hers, I'm like, yeah, seduce him so you can get all his secrets so you can save your witch friends. This seems impossible right now. Like, how are they gonna... First of all, if the secrets are revealed, how are they gonna make it work? And even if they do, how are they gonna change this world now? I know it's only been a little while, but so much damage has already been done. He's already killed so many witches. So how are they gonna have their HEA, you know what I mean? But like I said, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, even though it is taking me a little bit to read. But the plan is to finish this tonight. So I'll give you my update tonight. Something really bad has to happen in these last 150 pages for me to give it anything less than 5 stars. So I guess you'll see me when I do my update. Okay, so I just finished The Crimson Moth, aka Heartless Hunter. So for those of you who don't know, it's called Heartless Hunter in the US and Crimson Moth in the UK. I believe the second book will have the same name. I do prefer the UK cover, and I really, in the Netherlands, they only sell the UK cover. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I finished it and I really, really loved it. I definitely understand why a lot of people on Booktube love this book. I think, obviously, I just started off the year, so I don't know for sure. But if the second book is as good as the first one, there is a high probability this will make it onto my own favorites list in 2025. I loved both characters so much. I loved both Rune and Gideon. Like I said in my first update, I could definitely see both sides. I like the way that while reading it, at least me as a reader was kind of neutral. I could definitely understand both sides. Although I do have to say, by the end, I was definitely so like rooting for Rune over Gideon. I think this is, even though it's technically young adult, I think all ages could like this book, honestly. Even though, like, I mean, I read young adult books for a long time. I still read them, obviously. So I am of the opinion that young adult books can be enjoyed by both adults and young adults. But this one, like, she didn't shy away from talking about hard topics, like the one I just mentioned, but also things that happen towards the end. Definitely heartbreaking things. And the way we left off, I am very intrigued to see how she's gonna conclude this entire story arc in just one more book. Some things that happened here were predictable. Like I did predict one big giant plot line, but then some things did take me by surprise too. So this is my first Crescent City. I do know that The Last Namsara was a book that I did hear a lot of things about it. That is about dragons, I'm pretty sure. I was never really intrigued by that series, but now I definitely am. So hopefully I can get around to it this year too. I really enjoyed her writing style. There were some quotes in here that were beautiful in my opinion. I flew through this book. Like, if I had the time, I think I could have just, even though it did take me a while to read it, if I had read this on vacation, I think I could have definitely binged this all in one day. Like, you fly through it, the chapters are very short. She flips perspectives at just the right time. Like I said, because both of them because they're definitely enemies, you really want to see like both sides. I think she did that very well. So yeah, like I said, I can definitely understand why Booktube loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. And I am so happy I read it now because the sequel comes out next month and I'll be reading that book as soon as it's in my hands. So I am glad that I'm reading it now and not last year, because obviously then I'd have to wait longer for the sequel. I am a little bit tired, so I don't know if I have any other thoughts. If I do, I will talk about it when I film my sit-down part of this video. But for now, I can just say that I loved it and I would highly, highly recommend it. Just like how many people? Yeah, just like 37 other people. So as you could see, I really, really love this book. I 100% agree with Booktube on this one. So let's put it here in its rightful spot in 10th position. In number 9th position is the Powerless trilogy by Lauren Roberts. This trilogy was mentioned 38 times. 4 people mentioned the entire series. 22 people mentioned Powerless. 4 people mentioned Powerful. And 8 people mentioned Reckless. So this is actually the last book I read for this vlog. So let's cue to the vlog clips. So I'm currently reading Powerless and I'm on chapter 30, which I'm reading it on Everend right now. And so that's page 346. I am really, really, really loving it. This was actually a book that almost made it into like the top 10 of 2023 last year. So I really want to make sure to read this. I don't know if it's going to be in the top 10 as of right now, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. So Powerless has been pretty hyped starting last year. I believe it came out last year. Yeah. So this is a world where, or at least in the country where our main character lives, because of a plague that happened a couple decades ago, the people who survived that plague, most of them got extraordinary abilities and they are called the elites, right? Yeah. So there are a bunch of different abilities. Like you have amplifiers where you can amplify your voice. You have lie detection. You can teleport. You can create illusions. You can be invisible. Anyway, all sorts of different abilities. And then you have ordinaries. And the king believes that ordinaries infect elites by making their power less strong. So he has decreed that every single ordinary needs to be executed. He has 2 sons, Kit, the heir, And then you have Kai, who is the enforcer. So his role is basically to kill for the king. And one of the people he has to kill are ordinaries. And then you follow Payton. And she is an ordinary, but her father has taught her to pretend that she's a psychic. Basically to really pay attention to people and the way they act, to convince them that she is actually psychic. She's been living on the streets ever since her father died, and she has been stealing from people to try and survive and to take care of herself and her friend Adina. And then one day she actually steals from this handsome rich guy. Then she ends up saving his life, and that guy is actually Kai, the prince. And in this world, every couple of years they have this like Hunger Games like competition, which is called the Purging Trials. People get chosen to compete in those trials, and because she saved the prince, she's now called the Silver Savior, and her people have chosen her to take part in the trial. But she has no real powers, and even if she was psychic, that's still not an offensive power. During the trial, she has to stay at the palace, and both Kai but also Kit the prince are interested in her. So her and Kai have some amazing banter going on, and I am just eating that shit up. It's like my catnip. I am loving every interaction they have. There's a hair braiding scene, which I reacted to that scene. Stop. There's a hair braiding scene. Fuck, I already love Kai. Oh my god, do I love these two. I love their banter. They're amazing. I am almost finishing chapter 13, and they're training, and Blair just nicked her ear and he is trying to stop the blood from messing up her hair. So he's braiding her hair. Stop, I love him. And it's ruining my life. I love him so much. So I'm going to continue reading. But I just wanted to talk about it to somebody, since there's nobody here to gush to. Yeah, where I'm at now, they are in the first trials. They have been dumped in this forest and they have to survive. Is this the most original story out there? No, I don't think so. I believe people compare it to Red Queen. They say that she's stolen things from the Red Queen, but since I am such a Booktube oldie here, I've been around for 10 years, I know back then, that is one of the reasons why I didn't read the Red Queen back then. I know the Red Queen also had the same criticism that that series copied from other series out there. I don't remember which ones, honestly, but if you look that up, I'm sure you'll find it. I believe it was what's that series called? By Veronica Roth? No, not Veronica Roth. Alexandra Bracken. The Darkest Minds, I'm pretty sure. Because this also kind of reminds me of The Darkest Minds, plus obviously Hunger Games. But any like competition is going to remind people of Hunger Games. And honestly, for me is, okay, so how is it done? And I am just thoroughly entertained. I love these two together. I am very much shipping them. I am so excited when they have another scene together. I think they are great together. I love their banter. I like both characters. He has been trained his entire life to be this killer, and he has been trained in torture, and because he's trained in torture, he has been tortured himself by his own father. So I like that complicated relationship he has with his father. I love his relationship he has with his brother. I'm very interested to see. So now they're isolated together, but I'm interested to see once the first trial ends and they get back to the palace, what that dynamic's going to be like between him and his brother. And I really like Payton. I think she's an awesome main character. She's very fierce, protective, and very strong, and I like those kinds of characters. And yes, this is young adult, and that is what I talked about. I feel like young adult fantasy is very much on par with adult fantasy romances, you know? I just think they're very similar. The only thing is that this, I don't know if it's gonna have sex, but right now, it just reminds me how much I love like fantasy romances, and this just reminds me that I need to read more, and I'm glad this video is allowing me to do that. So I'm 50% of the way through. I do have to admit that there are some parts where I'm like, okay, did we really need that scene? So it does feel a little bit too long, because my version has like, I know this is like over 500 pages, maybe even 600. At least my version is more than 600 pages. And sometimes I feel like, because right now where we're at, I have been reading about this trial for a while now, and there are I feel like some scenes are a little bit redundant, but having said all that, I am still enjoying myself. Like, I could read 1,000 pages of these two bickering and bantering. And I actually bought the special edition hardcovers, the UK ones, because I wanted to buy the paperbacks, but then I saw that the hardcovers had some beautiful illustrations, so of course I bought that. So yeah, like I said, right now I'm thoroughly entertained. And I like some of the quotes in here. Let me read you some. Plagues, a pretty boy with pretty words. Dangerous. Every girl deserves something equally as pretty and deadly as they are. Mark my words, Prince, I will be your undoing. She's the embodiment of a bad decision, the twin of danger and desire, the fine line between deadly and divine, and I can feel myself drowning. She's bewildering as much as she is beguiling. And the goddess of timing once found us beguiling. She said she was trying. Peter, was she lying? My ribs. Anyway, like I said, I really like this book. It has all the fixings of things I love. There are multiple caretaking scenes in here. There is a who did this to you. There are dancing lessons where he teaches her to dance. And it's just fabulous. I love everything about it. So I am thoroughly entertained. Tonight I have to go to a birthday party, so I'm gonna get dressed up. So hopefully I'll finish it before then. So there is actually a couple updates where I don't look like I just woke up. So we'll see if I can finish it in 6 hours, which is when I want to leave for the birthday party. So yeah. Okay, so I just finished Powerless like literally 5 minutes ago. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. So I was debating while reading it. At my first update, I was really loving it. Like, it was on its way to becoming a 5-star. But, okay, so basically I really loved the first 40% and I really enjoyed the last 20%. It was just the middle 40% that felt slow. It felt repetitive. Like, there's no need to have 3 ball scenes. There's like, I felt like that 40% could have been edited down. Like, we had 3 balls. And especially like the first trial we had, I think I said it in my update, but that felt a little bit too long. There were a lot of scenes that I felt like she loved certain scenes that happen in a lot of books and she just crammed it into this one book, where I feel like this is a trilogy. She could have spaced those out a little bit, or we don't need to have all those scenes. Although there was a I Want to Call You Mine scene, which I reacted to that live, so I'll leave that clip here. Stop. Why is this man so hot? So she asks him what he wants her to call him. So his name is Kai, but really it's Malachi. So he tells her, you can call me whatever you want. So then he asks her, okay, so tell me, what do you want me to call you? And she says, what do you want to call me? And he says, I want to call you mine. Stop. Even though this book does feel too long, I do like those little scenes they have together. Like, stop, they are adorable. Especially him, Malachi. I love him. Anyway, just came to say that. I literally squealed when he said, I want to call you mine. Stop. So that was a really nice scene. It was raining, of course, and they almost kissed. And yeah, like I said, as much as I did enjoy this book and I really liked the characters, it felt a tad bit too long. I think if this had been 100 pages less, it would have worked perfectly for me. So I know this book it has been said that she took a lot of inspiration from other books, and I can definitely see that. But there was one thing that really surprised me. Like, she called at one point the people in the trial the young elites, and the reason I thought about it is I'm planning on reading The Young Elite soon. Even though it has been compared to Red Queen a lot, which I've not read that book yet. The Young Elites, there's a silver-haired heroine. It's also a plague or a disease that swept through the land that made a lot of the people that survived, made them have special powers, and they are called the Young Elites. So, I don't know. I know a lot of people, or a lot of books take inspiration from earlier books, I get that, but to actually use the word young elites when it is like a similar sort of premise, I don't know. But having said all that, I did enjoy, I was thoroughly entertained, especially for like the 60% I talked about, the first 40% and the last 20%, like especially the last chapters, I was like flying through them. I wanted to know what was going to happen. It was action-packed, and I definitely enjoyed that. And there was one scene that broke my heart. I didn't think she would go there in a young adult book, but she definitely did. So I'm interested to read, especially the novella, Powerful, to see. I think that one is definitely going to break my heart. But I can definitely see why this is so popular. For sure this is not going to be in my favorites of the year, but maybe the third book will. So I can definitely see this author developing, since I did highlight a lot of lines that I really loved. And this is her debut novel, so I can only guess where she'll go from here. I do think that she'll get better with each book she writes. So I am interested to obviously continue on with the series, but maybe the third book will be one of my favorites. And I'm also very interested to see what else she's going to do. Like I said, I can definitely see why a lot of people love this book, especially people who have not read a whole lot of books yet, or have not read a whole lot of young adult fantasies, or people who just started getting into reading like the last 3-4 years. So they don't really know about the books that are probably an inspiration for her. You know what I mean? I've been part of the book community like since 2011. So I've seen a lot of books come and go, and this definitely reminds me of a lot of things I've already read. But like I said, I was thoroughly entertained. It did take me a little bit longer to read than I wanted to, and that's mainly because of that 40%. The plan for me is to continue, like to read, I think the third one comes out in April, I'm pretty sure. So the plan is to read the novella and the second book before then. I'm very excited. Overall, I would recommend it. Maybe not if you have read a lot of like young adult fantasy or a lot of romantasy, then maybe this is similar to a lot of things. But like I said, like the things I said in my first update, I still stand by. I thought she did an amazing job with Kai and Peyton. I think they were well fleshed out characters, and they really came alive for me, and I really love their banter. So those things still stand true. So, and that is not really always the case in these types of books. Like sometimes a hero can be boring, you know. Kai definitely wasn't. Especially where they're at the end of the book, I'm interested to see how that's going to develop. So yeah, as you could see, I gave it 4 stars. I would agree with Booktube on this one. In fact, I liked it so much I bought the special edition just to get this beautiful print of my babies. So 9th spot goes to Powerless. The 8th spot goes to the Rose Hill series by Elsie Silver. So this series was mentioned 42 times. 1 person mentioned the entire series, 18 people mentioned Wild Love, and 23 people mentioned Wild Eyes. And I 100% agree with Booktube because Wild Eyes made it onto my own favorites video of the year. I read it in December and actually read this for a vlog that will be coming out end of February. So if you want to know my full thoughts, wait for that vlog to come out. And Wild Love I read as a new releases vlog, but I also talked about it in my Goodreads Choice Awards vlog. So Elsie Silver is Booktube's darling, but she's also mine. I have loved every single book this woman has published. I gave both these books 5 stars, and like I said, this one made it onto my own favorites video. So this is basically a spin-off sort of from the Chestnut series. So the first book you follow Willa's brother, and Willa was the main character in Heartless, which we'll talk about that one in a bit. And this is a series all following single dads. The first book, you follow a pining hero, and the way he becomes a single dad is when he was 19, he donated his sperm for $100, and now a 12-year-old girl shows up at his door saying that her father died and her mother is not doing so well, so she is looking for her biological father, who is Ford, to help her through this dark time. And once he checks out her story, is more than willing to help her. And he has a recording studio, which is where this one comes in, because this book you follow Skylar and Weston. And Skylar is this world famous country music star, think like as famous as Taylor Swift. And Weston is Rosie's brother from this book, and it's their romance. And this one made it onto my own top 10 list for a reason. I absolutely adored this book and 100% agree with Booktube on this one, and also on Wild Love, honestly. In the 7th spot is also a book that is not part of a series, and it's Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So this one was mentioned 46 times, and once again with this one, if I had a top 15, this might have made it on there. I read this one, once again, also for a new releases vlog, and this one also made an appearance in my Goodreads Choice Awards vlog. I gave this book 5 stars. I was thoroughly entertained. I know a lot of people who mentioned this book in their favorites video said that not a lot of people agree with their opinions, which it's not true. This one is in 7th spot, so a lot of people really love this book on Booktube. I believe it also made it pretty far into the Goodreads Choice Awards. Let me actually check that. It was in 3rd place, so definitely did very well. This is Ali Hazelwood's first paranormal romance. It is a romance between a vampire and a werewolf, and I love a good werewolf romance, and Lo was an excellent one, but who really shone in this book was Misery, the vampire. She was hilarious. I loved her. Basically, in this book, there are 3 different species: vampires, werewolves, and humans, and they all know about each other. And to kind of live in peace, every 10 years, a human child will be sent to live in vampire territory, and a vampire child will be sent to live in human territory. And Misery was such a child. She lived in human territory for 10 years, and therefore now that she's an adult, she doesn't really feel like she fits in with the humans, but also not really with the vampires. And now her father wants her to make another sacrifice, which is to marry the alpha of the werewolves, because they also want to make a pact with them. She doesn't want to, but then she realizes that her best friend, who's almost like her sister, and she was actually her foster sister, has disappeared, and she thinks the alpha of the werewolves has something to do with it. So that is the only reason why she agrees to this marriage. So they get married, and she thinks that he thinks that she smells really bad. If you've read werewolf romances, then you know it's probably because she's, say it with me, his fated mate. And this was just great. Lo has a sister who's amazing, and I just really love this book. And so I 100% agree with Booktube on this one. If you want to know my full thoughts, maybe check out my Goodreads Choice vlog, since a lot of these also made it into the Goodreads top 20 list. Then in 6th spot is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This one was mentioned 47 times. And my theory is, because I did this video last year, and even though I only watched half of the videos, in that video, it seemed like more people had the ACOTAR series on their favorites list than the Throne of Glass series. So my theory is the people who really loved ACOTAR last year started reading the Throne of Glass series this year, which is why this series has more people loving it, but I don't know if that's actually true. 8 people mentioned the entire series. 7 people mentioned The Assassin's Blade. 1 person mentioned Throne of Glass. 1 person mentioned Crown of Midnight. 1 person mentioned Heir of Fire. 3 people mentioned Queen of Shadows. 7 people mentioned Empire of Storms. 2 people mentioned Tower of Dawn. And 17 people mentioned Kingdom of Ash. So I obviously 100% agree with Booktube. The Throne of Glass series, even though according to Miss and Fury is my favorite book by Sarah J. Maas, the Throne of Glass series is definitely my favorite series by Sarah J. Maas. I have loved this series a long time. Like, I think I started reading it in 2014, so it has been 10 years. I don't know what to say that hasn't already been said. The first book, you follow Selena Sardathian, who's a assassin, but now she is imprisoned in a slave camp, and the prince of the realm plus his captain of the guard get her out of there, and they want her to enter in the king's trials to become the king's champion. And that is just the first book. It ends completely differently from how it started. Like I said, it's one of my favorite series with some of my favorite characters of all time. And yeah, 100% agree with Booktube on this one. Then 2 series share the 5th spot. The first one I'm going to talk about really quickly is the Magnolia Parks series. Was mentioned 53 times. 2 people mentioned the entire series. 6 people mentioned Magnolia Parks. 2 people mentioned Daisy Hates. 8 people mentioned The Long Way Home. 7 people mentioned Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. 28 people mentioned Into the Dark. So this series actually also made it into the top 10 list of 2023. I tried to read that series in that vlog and I just couldn't. That is 100% personal to me. There's a couple things I just don't like reading about. Socialites I don't like reading about. I don't like reading about cheating. I just don't like reading about rich people and their rich problems. And a pet peeve of mine is characters who constantly mention either their own wardrobe or other people's wardrobes. And for the people who love Magnolia Parks, you can already conclude that this is just not my series. I gave it 20 pages and I just knew that it was not for me. And since this is a lot of people's favorite series, and this is 100% not made for me, I just cut my losses, dipped out, and DNF. I do really love the covers, but it's just not for me. And that's okay. Not everything can be for everybody. As you can see, usually I 100% agree with Booktube. This is just one of the few books where Booktube and I don't mesh. But 53 other people have really, really loved this series, so don't let me deter you. Now for the other one that I 100% agree with Booktube on is the Windy City series by Liz Tomford. This series was mentioned 53 times. One person mentioned the entire series. 3 people mentioned Mile High. 13 people mentioned The Right Move. 11 people mentioned Caught Up. And 25 people mentioned Play Along. So even though Play Along didn't make it onto my top 10 this year, both The Right Move and Caught Up made it into my top 15 of 2023. So last year, both these books made it onto my favorites list. The Right Move is one of my favorite romances of all time. So I 100% agree with Booktube on this one. Play Along, I gave 4.5 stars. And I read it for the Goodreads Choice Awards video I did last year. So check that video out if you want my full thoughts. To me, this just felt, I don't know, just it didn't work for me 100%. I still gave it 4.5 stars because I love her writing style. I love these characters, but especially comparing it to the 2 books that came before it, this one paled a little bit in comparison, in my opinion, but I definitely agree with Booktube on this series. I am highly anticipating the 5th and final book in this series. So for those of you who don't know, this series is a sports romance series and you follow a couple different sports. So the first book you follow a guy who plays hockey, and then in the second book you follow a basketball player, and then in the third and fourth book you follow 2 brothers who are both baseball players. It's just great. What else can I say about this series? I 100% agree with Booktube on this series. In 4th place is the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver. I read this entire series in 2023, so I didn't read them this year, but 56 people mentioned this series in their favorites video. 2 people mentioned the entire series. 7 people mentioned Flawless. 23 people mentioned Heartless. 3 people mentioned Powerless, which makes me sad since this is my favorite in the series, and this one made it onto my own, this one made it very high in my favorites video of 2023. 18 people mentioned Reckless, and 3 people mentioned Hopeless. So I'm just gonna put the one that most people had on their favorites. So for those of you who don't know, the Chestnut Springs series, very popular series here on Booktube, as you can see. This one, you also follow a family of cowboys and them getting their HEA. And it's not just the family, it's also people connected to the family. So you follow the Eaton family. These 3 books, you follow the Eaton brothers. They have a sister, but she has a book in the series that came before this one. And then this, you follow the cousins of the Eaton plus their adoptive brother, I guess. And Reckless, you follow Summer, who's the heroine in this book, her sister, plus Rhett, in this book, his mentee. So a very popular series. I 100% agree with Booktube because I believe I gave 3 books in this series 5 stars. Powerless was one of my favorite books I read in 2023. And then the other 2 books I gave 4 stars. So still very high rating. And Elsie Silver is one of my favorite authors of all time. Then in 3rd place is the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. So I actually read Binding 13 for the favorites video I did last year. So this series was mentioned 62 times. 6 people mentioned the entire series. Binding 13 was mentioned 21 times. So let me put it here. Keeping 13 was mentioned 12 times. Saving 6 was mentioned 9 times. Redeeming 6 was mentioned 10 times. And Taming 7 was mentioned 4 times. So I actually read Binding and Keeping 13 in 2024. And like I said, if you want to know my in-depth thoughts, check out the vlog I did last year of reading Booktube's favorite romances of 2023. I can definitely see why a lot of people love this series so much. So I gave both these books 4.5 stars. I do think they're a little bit too long for me, and they're just heartbreaking because I really wanted to read Saving and Redeeming 6, but my heart just couldn't take it. I know that duology is going to break my heart, Joey's duology. And I do have a feeling that if I read his books, they're going to end up in my favorites video, but I just couldn't do it to myself this year. My heart was already breaking for him in Johnny and Shannon's duology. So just to think about reading his own point of view, I couldn't. I definitely see why a lot of people love this series so much. It's heartbreaking, and these characters will not let you go, because when I started reading Binding 13, the plan was just to read it for that vlog and continue on and read the second book sometime later, but I just couldn't. Even though this was a very long book, I immediately picked up the second book because there was a giant cliffhanger and I just needed to know if these characters were okay. So the first book, you follow Johnny and Shannon comes from this very, very abusive household, and on top of that, she also gets severely bullied at school. So her mother takes her away from school, from her public school, and sends her to Tommen University, even though it costs a lot of money to go there, but she wants her daughter to be safe. So she goes there, and on her first day, she gets hit in the head by a rugby ball. It was Johnny who accidentally kicked the ball at her head, and the moment he sees her, he immediately becomes intrigued. So it's their romance. But like I said, she's dealing with a horrible home life. Like it sucks very much, and he's very privileged, and he is his parents' only child, and they're very rich. So there's definitely a social classes difference. But the only thing he wants to do is save her. And the third and fourth book follow Shannon's brother and his girlfriend, and then the fifth book follows Johnny's best friend. So this one was very popular last year. That's why I read it last year, and it's still very popular. And once again, I 100% agree with Booktube. And I do, like I said, I think Saving and Redeeming 6 will make it. If I read them this year, they will make it onto my favorites video of 2025. In second place is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This book was mentioned 68 times, and this one actually also made it onto my own favorites video, so definitely agree with Booktube on this one. This book, you follow Daphne and Miles, and their respective partners leave them for the other one's partner. So now they live together and have to come to terms with that. And it's going to be their romance. This is my favorite Emily Henry, and one of my favorite books I read in 2024. And last but most certainly not least, the clear favorite. No need for a recount at all, because what's funny, okay, let me actually talk about it first. It's the Part of Your World series by Abby Jimenez. This series was mentioned a whopping 126 times. 6 people mentioned the entire series. 13 people mentioned Part of Your World. 27 people mentioned Yours Truly. And drumroll please, Just for the Summer was mentioned 80 times, which means even if this wasn't part of the series, Just for the Summer would have been number 1 anyway, since this one has 80 people mentioning it, and the second place was 68 people. I 100% agree with Booktube on this one specifically, because this was my favorite book I read in 2024. I absolutely love this book. So I read both these books in 2023, and I gave both books 4 stars. I could see the appeal. I could definitely see why people loved Abby Jimenez's writing style so much and why people love these books. But both these books just had something missing that prevented me from giving it 5 stars. This one, however, had everything I could ever want. It was beautiful, it was amazing, and I 100 billion% agree with Booktube on this one. Like I said, it was my favorite book I read in 2024. It was beautiful. So since this is the one that a lot of people mentioned, I'll just talk about this one. So you follow Emma and Justin goes on Reddit and puts on the like, am I the asshole subreddit, a certain question he has. And while he's explaining it, he also reveals that he's the guy that girls date before they find the love of their lives. And Emma reads it, and she decides to message him to tell him that she has a similar problem, that she's the one that guys date before finding the love of their lives. So they're chatting, and while they're talking, they come up with this plan that will cancel out their curses. Basically, if they date each other, that means their curses are canceled, and now they can go ahead and find the love of their lives. Since she's a traveling nurse, she can visit him, so they decide to date just for the summer and then break up after the summer. Both of them have big problems with their mothers. Her mother constantly kept abandoning her, which means that she definitely has abandonment issues. Definitely a, what's that called? Avoided attachment for sure. His mother is going to jail. Even though he had an amazing upbringing, his mother was a great mom. She did something that now means she has to go to jail. He has 3 younger siblings who are underage, so he has to take care of them, even though he's like 29 or something. And he definitely blames his mother for her decisions. And of course they date, but of course they fall in love with each other, especially Justin. He makes it very clear that he is starting to get real feelings. And she's kind of trying to deter him from feeling things for her. But of course, it's going to be their romance. Justin is just the perfect man, in my opinion. He is what every man should aspire to be. He's just perfect. I loved him so much. And this was a beautiful book, in my opinion. And not just in my opinion, also 80 other people's opinions. So this was Booktube's top 15 romances and romantasies of 2024. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were, and if any of them made it onto your favorites video. Now I want to highlight some diverse romances. Should I remove these? They can stay here, they're fine. Okay, so 3 people mentioned the Mead Mishap series by Kimberly Lemmings. So 1 person mentioned the entire series. 1 person mentioned That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and 1 person mentioned That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. I haven't read this series yet, but it's very high up on my own TBR. Especially the werewolf one sounds amazing. Basically, these are all like monster romances, and I've heard from a lot of people that they're very funny, and it just sounds like a fabulous, hilarious, good time. You Again by Kate Goldberg was mentioned 3 times. And this one is, I'm pretty sure, like a Raylo inspired book. I believe both of them are bisexual and it's their romance. I bought this book because it made it onto Goodreads Choice Awards of 2023. And I only read the top 10 for that one, so I didn't get around to this one. So these are about 2 people who actually hate each other. So both of them dated the same woman and they both got dumped. And that made them become friends in a way. It's their romance. I don't really know what this book is about that much, but it made it onto 3 people's favorite list of 2024. Then one I'm actually reading right now, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna DNF it. It's Between Friends and Lovers by Shirlene Obobi. This was mentioned 3 times. So this is basically like a love triangle. This girl who is a doctor, but also like a doctor influencer, and she has had this unrequited crush on her best friend. He never reciprocated, and now she's dating this other guy. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if I want to continue on with this book, but where I'm at now, there's just too many annoying things. Even though I tend to love a pining heroine, but 3 people really love this book. Another book that was mentioned 3 times is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. I really love this book. I read it also for the Goodreads Choice Awards, but also earlier when it came out. I gave this 5 stars. Once again, if I did a top 15, this probably would have made it onto my top 15. This is, once again, like a mixed genre book. So this is definitely a mix between a romance, a magical realism. Yeah, I guess that's it. like a paranormal romance. I definitely, like, if you really love Divine Rivals, you might really love this one. I compare this one definitely to that one. Also, if you love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I think you're also gonna really love this book. So you follow Ricky Wilde. She comes from this very prestigious family in, where are they from? Atlanta, and they have this funeral business, but she really doesn't want anything to do with that. She wants to start her own flower shop. So she meets this lady who has this empty space in Harlem for her flower shop. So she goes there, and while she's there, she discovers the history of Harlem, and she meets this guy, this mysterious guy. And you also get like, oh, that's what I wanted to compare to. So this is a mix between a romance. This is a mix between a contemporary romance, a paranormal romance, and a historical fiction. Because you get a couple chapters here of the past of Harlem in the 1920s. This was just beautiful. Definitely nothing like I've ever read before. I could definitely agree with Booktube on this one. Then 4 people mentioned the Mischief and Matchmaking series by Emma Alban. 3 people mentioned Don't Want You Like a Best Friend. And 1 person mentioned You're the Problem, It's You. So these are obviously Taylor Swift inspired titles, which say less. This is a historical romance, and the first book is a female-female romance, and basically like a parent trap situation. So these 2 girls want to matchmake their parents, and they fall in love with each other while doing that. And this sounds very cute. Looking forward to reading this one soon. The Kings of Sin series by Anna Huang. 1 person mentioned King of Wrath, and this one actually made it onto my favorites list this year. 1 person mentioned King of Wrath. 3 people mentioned King of Greed, and 1 person mentioned King of Sloth. I really love this series. Anna Huang is one of my favorite authors of all time. I will read anything that woman writes, and I just love her books. 6 people mentioned Only for the Week. I read this book earlier this year in a vlog, which I'll leave that linked for you. I think I gave it 4 stars. I can definitely see why a lot of people love this. Roman is definitely book boyfriend material. He was amazing. But I think for me, this was a little bit too messy for me to 100% enjoy it. I think there were a lot of other things going on, and this was very short. Like, it was only 270 pages. So there was a lot of drama between her and her sister and her mother that I felt like took over the romance plot that I was more interested in. But like I said, I can definitely see why a lot of people love this book. I believe it recently got traditionally published, so good for Natasha Bishop. This, I believe, was supposed to be a series, and I don't know when the second book comes out, but I will definitely be reading it once it comes out. The Green Sisters series by Christina Forrest was also mentioned 6 times. 2 people mentioned The Neighbor Favor, and 4 people mentioned The Partner Plot. So I read The Neighbor Favor in the same vlog I read this book in. I really enjoyed it. I also think I gave it 4 stars. Definitely really enjoyed it. This book, you follow a author and a girl who works in publishing, and it's also like secret identity in a way. And this is a neighbor romance, which I tend to love, like roommates or neighbor romances. So this was great. I haven't read The Partner Plot yet, but I really want to do that soon. Immortal Dark by Tigast Gurma was mentioned 7 times. This, I believe, is a fantasy romance involving vampires, and 7 people really loved it this year. Then there is the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. This one was mentioned 12 times. 1 person mentioned the entire series. 2 people mentioned the fine print. 6 people mentioned terms and conditions. And 3 people mentioned Final Offer. Final Offer made it into my favorites of 2023. I read this book for the Goodreads Choice Awards of 2023. And I really thought her new series was going to make it into the Goodreads Choice Awards of 2024, but it didn't. I really love The Final Offer. I haven't read the first 2 books yet, but I am very keen to do that. So her other series, like I said, I 100% thought it was going to make it in the Goodreads Choice Awards of 2024, but it didn't, is the Lakefront Billionaire series. This one was also mentioned 12 times. Love Redesigned was mentioned 4 times, and Love Unwritten was mentioned 8 times. So since Goodreads isn't forcing me to read this series, I have to force myself. I especially Love Unwritten. I heard so many good things about, so cannot wait to read that one. And last but most certainly not least is the Skyland series by Kennedy Ryan. So this one actually barely made it. Like, it almost made it. If I did a top 20, it would have made it. This one was in 17th spot. So 23 people mentioned this series. 9 people mentioned Before I Let Go, and 14 people mentioned This Could Be Us. So I read this one both in a new releases vlog and my Goodreads Choice Awards vlog. This one, I can definitely see why a lot of people love this, but this felt a little bit more women's fiction than romance to me, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Once again, Judah was amazing. He was the perfect man in my opinion, but we just focused so much on Soledad's story and not enough on his that it didn't feel like a balanced romance. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, check out either my Goodreads Choice video or my new releases vlog. Before I Let Go, I'm planning on reading next month, so cannot wait. I think this one is going to be my favorite in the series, and I believe the 3rd book comes out in May. So I'm definitely going to be reading that as soon as it comes out. So let's mention a couple books that you might have thought I was going to mention, but barely made it. So Quicksilver almost made it. This one was in 16th spot. The Maple Hill series, also 16th spot. Both of them were mentioned 25 times. When the Moon Hatched was mentioned 23 times. So in 17th spot. Phantasma was mentioned 21 times. So in 18th spot. The Ruinous Love trilogy. I really thought that was going to make it, but not a lot of people really loved Leather and Lark. Yeah, only 4 people. So I think if that book was loved a little bit more, it would have made it. But this one was mentioned 19 times. So it was in 19th spot. And then Belladonna was mentioned 18th time. So in 20th spot. So yeah, I talked a lot. My throat is getting sore, so I'm gonna stop now. I really would love to know all your thoughts. And like I said, I think I said it like 2 hours ago. If I haven't mentioned your video in any way, let me know. If you don't make videos, I would really love to know what was your favorite romance or romantasy that you read in 2024. If you're down there, leave me a prize emoji, because this is definitely Booktube's favorite romances, so definitely worthy of a prize. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.